welcome to Roadmap 2023, our election issues and personalities tracking program. I am Ladi Akiriduluale. Thanks for being with us. My guest on the program today says further scrutiny must be placed on those who manage the electoral management body, INEC, especially in light of what transpired in the Adamawa governorship supplementary election. My guest also says women's participation in politics has taken a nosedive and that the country's development will suffer as a result. Roadmap 2023 talks to Professor of Politics of Development and Head of the Department of Political Science and Administration at the University of Port Harcourt in Rivers State, Fidelis Allen. Professor Allen, thank you for your time. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Let's begin our conversation from a general review. I was one of those privileged to attend an event in Abuja in the run-up to the elections where you delivered a historical analysis of the election patterns, particularly as they related to particular geopolitical zones. And that event has played out itself in the general election that we just witnessed. So I wanted to find out if you saw what many of us who listened to you on that occasion saw in the 2023 general elections. What was your own assessment of the polls?
Well, you know that the biggest challenge that Nigeria has is that of being able to manage elections effectively. Because looking at the country's journey from colonialism to the post-colonial state, looking at the democratic seasons that Nigeria has experienced, one thing that is clear that anyone at any time, any point in time, would agree with me is that we have struggled with good management of elections. Again, looking at the character of political gladiators, the political class, looking at the character of voters, citizens as voters, one thing is also clear, that increasingly the issue of mass participation of citizens in electoral processes has been very problematic. And so looking at the past elections since 1999, one thing that we can actually say in the analysis I've also done in the past is that since 1999, Nigeria has been able to transit from one election season to another without seeing the military. For me, that is an achievement. But when we come to look at the issue of democratization and look at the quality of our democracy, we need to be sober regarding the quality of participation, regarding the quality of management of elections in this country. Now, come to think of it, elections are very critical in any multi-party democracy. The Nigerian case has been a source of concern and worry for many people who believe that we ought to have moved sufficiently beyond where we are today. And so in my analysis, it was clear, like some kind of prophecy, that X will happen if A and B decides to do what they feel is correct in their own thinking as political animals in the system. So what we have seen, looking at the 2023 elections, we saw another opportunity as Nigerians and others in the world to assess where we are in terms of political development, in terms of quality of election governance or management. And we saw that Nigerians had very high expectations because the election management body, key election management body in this country, had given Nigerians so much hope with a new act, the Electoral Act 2022, and the reforms in that act, the use of technology, and all of that, summing up to provide a basis for the high hopes. And so the presidential election was actually supposed to give Nigerians that sense of realization of the hope that they had expected. But that was not the case in many states in this country.
There's a certain paradox in what you're saying, Prof, because so many people in the run-up to this election, so many people thought that participation would be greatly enhanced, would be greatly improved, going by the campaigns, the fact that several new political forces were introduced. But come election days themselves, what we saw as voter turnout was pretty disappointing. There wasn't a massive, even a significant improvement in terms of voter turnout from what we had in the past in any of the geopolitical zones, in spite of the hype, if you like, in the run-up to the election. So again, I won't ask the question, does that surprise you? And if not, why? And if so, why?
Well, the total number of registered voters was quite impressive. Of the election. So that alone gave the impression that the 2019 elections and previous elections. But even so, it was better than the elections that held subsequently, the governorship and State House of Assembly elections. But we saw that hope dashed, not because Nigerians decided to be apolitical, not because voters decided to be apolitical, at some point, but because the use of technology, which promised better management of elections and promised delivery of power to the people. Because when citizens feel a sense of security and enablement to participate in election processes as voters, they kind of, go with the impression that they have exercised popular power. But that was what was stolen. I don't think there's any paradox in what I'm saying. If you look at the governorship and State House of Assembly elections, the level of apathy that greeted those elections is something that is regrettable. And so if you talk about that election and ask questions around the impact the previous elections, the disappointments around the previous elections had on those elections, then you will see that, or you would have seen that it appears that effective participation of citizens in elections is a function of the confidence that citizens have in the electoral process. So you see that what happened in the governorship, State Houses of Assembly election was a function of what had happened in the previous elections. The sense of disappointment, the sense of frustration that many legitimate voters had, with the outcome and the process in the previous election. Really is an issue that I think in subsequent elections, I'm just worried about which elections should come first. Because this was a big issue even at the National Assembly concerning reforms in the electoral system. Which election should come first? But you know that politicians, especially at the national front, would desire presidential elections or elections for the president and members of the National Assembly coming first. Maybe the outcome would have been different. Maybe the situation would have been different, who knows? But you see, the fight for the office of president is tougher than the fight for the office of governor. As it is, the post-election atmosphere is that of swearing in the candidate that was eventually declared as winner. At this point, we should only hope to be able to influence governance, day-to-day governance, regarding the well-being of Nigerians, regarding what needs to be done to fix the many problems that Nigeria faces today. And of course, Nigerians are looking for a regime that will address critical issues affecting their well-being. And you and I know that economy is a critical factor. Security is a critical factor. Nigerians want to be able to see a regime that is able to respond to their security needs, their economic needs, and several other aspects of life that Nigerians have seen to be very problematic in the last couple of years. So for me, at the moment, my prayer is that the coming regime, the president-elect would listen to key segments of the Nigerian state, would take very seriously state civil society relations, business civil society relations, will take these relations very seriously and ensure that the government is responsive to the needs of Nigerians. If that happens, many will forget the sense of frustration that they have encountered, they have seen as a result of the last elections. For me, I'm expecting a regime that will respond to the critical question of security, which is really an issue that everyone knows within and outside this country needs proper attention. So it doesn't matter the party that is going to be at the center at this point. The party and the president-elect, along with those at the National Assembly, with responsibility to provide leadership through good laws and oversight activities, will ensure that Nigerians have a sense of relief. Nigerians feel the other side of the benefits of governance.
Now, being a scholar of politics and politics of development, to be precise, the manner of electing those who lead also has a direct correlation with development, so we are told, because that way they are able to mobilize the populace in support of particular goals and objectives. So I'm wondering, as someone who has studied this over the years and who has been able to monitor the progress, if you like, of these developments, what possible further changes do you think could be made, that the incoming administration could make in terms of the electoral process? You've talked about the deep frustration, the anger, and therefore the apathy that a lot of people displayed towards the subsequent elections after the presidential elections, because those elections did not meet their expectations in many respects. But what further changes are possible or should be undertaken or could be considered for undertaking in order to, again, improve the electoral process, so that, you know, what we witnessed this time, what we will expect to witness even in the elections coming in November this year and the general elections coming subsequently in 2027 will be an obvious improvement on what we have just witnessed?
Elections are definitely instruments of determining succession in democracies. Good elections, free and fair, credible elections are highly rated, acknowledged as instruments for determining succession. However, elections alone are not adequate to make governance responsive to the needs of citizens, which is why, for a country like Germany, the German ruler who was a key actor in the Second World War, was elected by citizens, was duly elected by citizens, but the day-to-day governance and decisions that he had to take after elections were authoritarian. And so, in my view, elections alone are not adequate, but elections, good elections and good management of elections are very crucial in any country or society that is democratizing or improving on its quality of democracy. And so for that, I think going forward, the appointment of the head of the election management body in this country needs some reforms. I think that the civil society, if we tell ourselves the truth that we are moving to a better state of nationhood, we are moving to a state with more cohesiveness in relations among key ethnological units in this country, then we need to be able to reform the electoral system to accommodate a more transparent and society-driven process in the appointment of the head of the election management body in this country. A situation where you have the president and you have the majority of lawmakers at the National Assembly who are loyal to the president, who are probably from the same ethnic group with the president, will do very little in scrutinizing the head of the election management body. And so what that means is that if you have a president like that and you have a National Assembly with a composition of members that are loyal, ethnically loyal to the president, then it is very difficult for you to have the head of an election management body that will be free from undue influence from the party that the president belongs or the ethnic group that the president belongs. And so if we really want the best going forward in future in terms of reforms of the electoral system, we need to involve the civil society in the appointment of head of the election management body. Because you're talking about an umpire. You're talking about someone in a position with so much power. And if he chooses to betray the trust of Nigerians, he will do so in a very subtle way. And so we need to understand that when elections are rigged in any election season, it is not because that election was rigged on the day of election. If any election is rigged at all, it is because this process has started long before the election day, even with the appointment of the head of the election management body. So the rigging process can start from the point that someone is being appointed as head of the election management body, which means that we need some reforms in that area. We need some reforms.
But is it only in the headship of the electoral body? I mean, our experience has shown, I mean, going by what happened with the Adamawa governorship election and the aftermath of the supplementary polls, that perhaps it's not just the headship of the election management body, even some of the key officials within the election management body bear or need to be further or better scrutinized. Many people talk about the fact that there is no provision in the law that prevents the appointment of anybody, particularly as a resident electoral commissioner. And that, so even if you were somebody with a well-known political bias or political interest, you could still end up being appointed a resident electoral commissioner. And in the case of Adamawa State, that was brought to bear because, I mean, it was a brazen act on the part of the person who was the resident electoral commissioner. The process had not been concluded. He was not the returning officer. And he went ahead and announced someone as winner of that election. And when attempts were made to correct him, he stood his ground. But with reference to how such people get into the position in the first place, don't you think that they also need to be further scrutinized in view of what we now know?
Very well, I agree with you. I very well agree with you. But you know, there's a saying that when you see people dancing in a forest and there's no drummer, look very well, you will see someone playing the music. You look very well, you will hear the drum beating from a distance. So I agree with you that key officers of the election management body, appointment of key officers of the election management body must reflect, must be in tune with the wishes of the nation-building principles that we so desire. I'm aware of the federal character principle. I'm aware of the need for social cohesion in this country. Now, when you look at what happened in the 2023 election with regards to ethnic profiling, and look at the critical issue of social cohesion in Nigeria, a country with 4 major ethnic groups and more than 350 minor ethnic groups. Nigeria is in their need of social cohesion and does not need an electoral system that will contribute to the problem of nation building. And so if the appointment of members of the election management body is done in accordance with key principles for driving social cohesion, nation building, state building in this country, I think we will have a better country. The subsequent elections in this country might be better.
Indeed. Now, let's look at the election management body itself. There are many people who say that as an institution, INEC has too much to do. It has to organize elections. It has to organize logistics. It has to identify electoral offenders. It has to police the polling booths. It has to a whole lot of things. It has to monitor and supervise the process of collation and the eventual announcement. It has to participate in post-election litigation. Sometimes it has to participate in pre-election litigation as well. And that perhaps we need to unbundle a number of these functions to other agencies to perform. For example, the issue of logistics. On election day, how voting materials and voting personnel get to polling booths should be handled by an entirely different agency or even by the private sector, some have suggested. What do you make of this?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to take some responsibilities, such as logistics, from INEC and give to another agency, maybe a completely new agency or a private sector service delivering body to handle. But again, I believe that those at INEC have consistently had exchanges with election management bodies in other countries. For example, India. India is a big democracy. And when you look at elections in India, there's a lot to learn from that country. And I think politicians in this country, members of the election management body in this country have from time to time visited some of these countries to see what their election management bodies have been doing, to learn from them. So if they've had these opportunities and they continue to have them, one would explain it. Because some of the excuses that people make are mere smoke screens. I mean, maybe just a way to hide the unethical aspect or dimensions of the work they are expected to do that were not properly done. So, yes, I agree with you. INEC has so much to do, and we may have the problem of capacity. For example, if we look at the use of technology in the last elections, before the elections, Nigerians were informed about the readiness of the election management body to handle the elections with technology. And it was the promise of the use of technology that gave many voters, confidence and shaped their psychology positively. So if the technology failed in some places, as we were told, or if they were not used at all, as we came to see, who do you blame? Do you blame blame it on lack of capacity, or you blame it on other factors, environmental factors. Well, I think it chose to work well. Things went well, and you and I know that the problems we have seen with the 2023 election did not happen in all the states of this country. So I am of the view that we can do better. So learning must continue. And I'm also aware that the government did very well to provide the resources needed for INEC to effectively manage the elections. That alone suggests that the government was in principle ready to conduct free, fair, and credible elections. That alone for me. Because once resources are provided, one should almost conclude that effective management of such resources to achieve the goals for which those resources were appropriated should work in the interest of society. Should work in the interest of society. So for me, there's need for scrutiny, proper scrutiny of the roles that INEC can surrender to other government agencies or private partners or investors, and those that it can effectively retain.
Now, Prof, I know you are particularly passionate about gender issues and gender studies. So my next question will be right up your alley. The participation of women in this process has kind of dwindled down the years. There were always complaints about the level of participation of women in the political process and decision-making. And there was something about a 35% affirmation, which was to suggest that, at various levels, that should be the absolute minimum as a percentage that women should occupy. I doubt that we have ever attained that level at any point. But now, rather than be moving in that direction, we're headed in the other direction. I mean, if you take, there's no female governor as a result of this electoral process. I think there are only about 3 or 4 female senators, maybe about 12 or so in the House of Representatives. And these are numbers that are worse than the numbers that we had in the previous election cycle. So one is wondering, why are we going back? In your view, why do you think we're going back as an expert in this area? Why are we going back?
Well, it's unfortunate that we have seen a decline in women's participation in in the political process at the level of election. The records or data tells us that women in Nigeria constitute about 49.8%. So, as voters, women have the strength, have the power to participate in the political process. But as people seeking political office at elective levels, there are so many challenges that women face. I subscribe to the idea of affirmation. When we look at these challenges, for example, godfatherism. Godfathers don't see women as fertile grounds to invest politically. So many godfathers won't go for women; they'll prefer men. But of course, the patrimonial system that we have, the idea of godfatherism that is embedded in the Nigerian political system at the level of primary elections, the choice of candidates, is an issue that women have found very difficult to address because they lack the resources. Want to participate in political offices, but they do not have the resources to do so. They can't pay for campaigns. And you and I know how expensive it has become in this nation to be involved in election campaigns. So this is a key issue. Financing political campaigns is a major problem, but we also know that there are several other challenges associated with the patriarchal culture that many communities, many ethnic groups in this country are upholding, practicing. Even though there is currently no law in this country preventing women from seeking political offices, women continue to face the background, patriarchal traditions, cultures, discriminations that put them down so much that they are unable to boldly rise to challenge men in elections. So that is a problem. And it's unfortunate we are where we are now with women, with the number of women in elected positions declining. But again, I have also observed that many women in this country who should vote for their fellow women choose not to do so, maybe because the men influence them too much to the point that they always want to choose or vote for male candidates in elections. So that is a problem. So overall, I think it will take some time for women to begin to rise when it comes to occupying elective positions, even though there are no laws stopping them. But again, there are so many women acquiring economic and educational status that one can say that there has been real improvement when it comes to gender, when it comes to advancement between the man and the woman in society. So you have women making waves in business, you have women making waves in education, you have women making waves in careers. So how do all of this translate into political empowerment for women? So I also think that a lot has to be done when it comes to women supporting women, women mentoring women. The men will hardly mentor women. The men are very suspicious of women. They're very patriarchal. And so women should mentor women. That's where we are.
That's rather controversial, because when you speak to women, sometimes they tell you, well, I don't want to do anything because I'm a woman. I want to be treated as an equal with everybody else and so on. And therefore, they don't want, they are not supporters of affirmative action. They don't want quota systems. They don't want to be have special seats reserved for them, because according to the ones that I've spoken to, all those things tend to put them in a category where they are not the equal of men. Is this logic viable, if you like?
No, but I've said it that most women, exhibit dispositions that completely portray their lack of interest in their fellow women when it comes to politics. And I've wondered why. Women, I've heard women say, I don't want affirmative action. I want to be treated on merit, which is fine, But you see, the gender inequality is systemic. It's systemic. And it's not a Nigerian problem. This is a global problem. Even within the United States, even in North America, the issue of gender inequality continues to be on the political agenda. So, in many parts of the world, gender inequality remains an issue that needs to be adequately addressed. And so, affirmative action is a way of making the system to respond to a problem that individuals may not be able to address in the short term. So if you have an affirmative policy, it goes to show that because society is fundamentally rule-based, so any rule-based society can be expected to see such rules as beneficial for the system. So if you have an affirmative policy, you assume that because the problem is systemic, you can use rules or policies to drive a change, even if that is going to be piecemeal. And so to completely rule out affirmative action, for me, but people are free to hold their individual views, and people are free to have views that suit their own ideological calculations and other calculations.
As we begin to wind this discussion down, perhaps I can ask you about taking a look ahead now. There are those who have pointed out that one of the things they'll be looking forward to is a day when within our electoral process, all litigation that has to do with the outcome of the elections are ended before those who are declared winners take office, take the oath of office. Not that, people take office and then, they are still facing litigation for months, in some cases years, after they have been sworn into the office. Do you think this is something that will be of benefit to the country, especially since up until now we have not been practicing that?
Well, even if in principle we are able to resolve all post-election disputes in court, in reality, that will not be possible. Because you're talking about volume, you're talking about capacity, the capacity of the judiciary to handle all post-election adjudication processes. And for me, the only time one should say it may be possible to see all disputes resolved before swearing in of those that have been elected in elections should be when politicians begin to recognize the value of alternative dispute resolution. Nigeria is gradually coming to that point where alternative dispute resolution would become a key aspect of its justice system. Many states are already setting up multi-door courthouses. I think that the laws setting up multi-door courthouses should specifically identify elections, post-election dispute resolution or adjudication process as a key area of engagement. If that happens, and these multi-door courthouses exist in all the states of this country, we are likely to see judges and tribunals referring cases to these multi-door courthouses, election cases, election-related cases, to these multi-door courthouses. If this begins to happen, I think that at that point, we may see disputes arising from elections take office. That's my personal opinion.
Indeed, Professor Fidelis Allen, interesting views, interesting perspectives. Thank you for your time on the program. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me.
That's our program today. We would, of course, like to hear from you on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to or watch this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast and YouTube pages. Please visit our website, channelstv.com, to get started. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Goodbye.